Prince William County, and this is exciting because look at the date. Look at the date. It's March 23rd, right? 2024. This is the day that Patrick Henry did his thing down in Richmond. We'll get to that in a little bit. But Prince William County, we are now there at the 250th anniversaries. And I couldn't be more excited. I've been waiting for this. I've been reenacting for 25 years. And anniversaries mean a lot to me. And now we're here. And Prince William County led the way. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Prince William County and its role in the Revolution. Now, I'm going to start with Dumfries because I raised my family in Montclair. And I was actually the president of the Wings Spots, or Historic Dumfries, for a while, after the big scandal, by the way, if anybody knows what I'm talking about there. And I've been away for the last 6 years. But Dumfries just blew me away when I learned more and more about it. It's a charming little city that's been overrun by suburban sprawl and all that. But you could still see the trace ghost outlines, the trace routes of the roads, because it was laid out in a grid. I'm going to show you that in just a second. So this is Lee Lansing's drawing. Lee Lansing did a lot of work over his lifetime for Dumfries and all. And so this is a copy of one of his drawings of what the town would look like. I've kayaked Quantico Creek. I've gotten all the way up to Route 1 before in a kayak. I've gone down over to the power plant. I've explored all this in the 25 years that I was here. And of course, it's very, very exciting that, if you just look a little closer, you got to squint sometimes behind all the other stuff. You're like, wow. Now this, of course, doesn't exist. And I'm not even sure that's totally inaccurate depiction of what the courthouse looked like. But we do have the courthouse lot. We've got Williams Ordinary, yay. I wanted to put in the Henderson House, but I didn't like any of the pictures that I found. So this is the Tebbs mansion that stood behind the Williams Ordinary, and of course the Wings Spots Museum itself, and then the church over there, Quantico Church. I hope if you've never been there, go. It's right by I-95 and all that, but they put sound barriers up, and then sometimes you can get lost amongst some of the headstones and where the church was. But this was a very, very important town. Look at this. This was a grid. I've long since forgotten which lot was which, but basically Cameron Street still exists. Okay, where's this one? I can't read them in a blurry. King Street right here. Some of these streets still exist. They're pretty much on the same road beds that they were before. And so you could go back and figure out, okay, where was Wings Spots? Was it lot 64 or was it probably lot 65? Because it's on that side of the road. This is I don't know, where's the courthouse? Courthouse! Here we go, now we can do it. There's the courthouse lots, which means that's the Henderson House, which means that's Wings Spots right there, okay? Building there. And then Williams Ordinary's down this way a little bit. So, again, Dumfries. I hope you all know, a booming town in colonial days, right? In the 1760s, tobacco trade and all that. All right. When you look at Prince William County and then you look at Dumfries and all that, you got to start with the leaders of the county. And so I'm going to highlight probably the most, in my opinion, next to the most important one is Henry Lee II. Henry Lee II doesn't get a lot of attention, but he was a big player in the House of Burgesses. He was around as county lieutenant. That's pretty much like the county executive with the power to call out the county militia. Back when George Washington was a young kid in the French and Indian War, he was dealing with Henry Lee II of Leesylvania. Hopefully you've all gone over to Leesylvania and you've walked the historic area, the historic trail, and you've gone right here. And what sits right here now? A trench. Somebody in their wisdom in the 50s cut a road right through there. But this little area still exists. I used to take my dog there all the time. Literally, it seems like you walk right up this road today, the road that exists is just like this, and there's a nice little flat area there. So Leesylvania was a large land plantation, and Henry Lee II lived there, and he was like I said, a House of Burgesses member. He ends up being a senator when we become a state. And he and his wife are buried right over here. Again, on one of the trails, probably over there. All right, Thomas Blackburn. Do I have anybody from Ripon Lodge here? Anybody from Ripon Lodge? Yes. I was so excited. I played the lottery when it came up for sale back in, I don't know, I forget when, but I was playing the lottery so I could buy it to preserve it because I was afraid it would be developed, and I was so happy when the county did it. And of course, Thomas Blackburn steps up and becomes a Burgess and a delegate to the, I think 4 of the 5 Virginia conventions. He also ends up getting wounded in the war, in the Revolutionary War. William Grayson, Colonel Grayson. You've probably heard of him if you've ever been, what's it, where's over by Woodbridge, Marumsco, yeah. I never could find that place. I looked and looked and looked. Is it easy? It's right. I was up by the Wendy's. I probably was standing right on it, didn't see it. So these are just a few of the other names, kind of the next tier in my opinion. And I just picked these guys randomly, not randomly, but there are others that could easily be up on this list. But I assume you've heard of Grayson. I'm going to talk about him a little bit. Fauci Tebbs is always an interesting one. He was definitely a county leader, former Burgess, and going to play a big role in our resolves in June. Cuthbert Bullitt and Richard Graham. Didn't know much about them, but their names pop up a lot. And then, of course, I like this guy particularly because for a while I reenacted his unit, the 3rd Virginia Regiment. And Andrew Leach, and of course, what do we have now? A water park named after him. Woo! But we'll talk about him in a little detail too. Okay, so we start with this incident. You guys all know what's going on in this picture, right? They throw the tea in the harbor. That happened in December, 250 years ago, December 16th, 1773. They throw a tea in the harbor up in Boston. We find out about it in January, really. It starts showing up in our newspapers. And most Virginians are like, tisk tisk. That is not appropriate. You don't destroy private property. You see letter after letter, people saying, I don't support that. That's lawlessness and all that. Then, bam, in May, the Parliament's reaction comes in. And everybody is stunned. You have all heard the phrase, he's going to use a sledgehammer to kill a gnat. That's kind of what the Parliament did. They're trying to basically make an example. They're trying to intimidate everybody. And by closing Boston Harbor, by suspending the Massachusetts Charter, and essentially suspending their government, by sending troops over to Boston. This is overkill. This is overkill. And clearly it's meant to send a message. Okay? But it backfires. And who leads the charge, guys, here in Virginia? Who leads the charge? Prince William County. Because I know it's a lot to read, and I'm not encouraging you to read it all, but this is the actual resolve that was debated and then passed in Dumfries on June 6th, 1774, the first, that I can find, the first county in Virginia to stand up. Now, guys, I want you to think for a second. This was a moment of truth for a lot of different people. Boston had gone and poked the bear. They poked the bear. They poked the British government by dumping that tea. Now, there were some people who said, hey, you got to pay a consequence for that. And all that. And then there are others who saw what happened and when they went too far. And we have to make a decision right then and there. Are we going to stick our necks out and help those Massachusetts malcontents? Are we going to help those folks? Or are we going to sit back and go, hey man, they asked for it, it's their problem. Well, you see what we did. Under the principle that you've always heard about, that no person ought to be taxed but by his own consent, no taxation without representation. We've been hearing that since 1765. 9 years earlier with the Stamp Act. And then we basically reached the conclusion that Boston is now suffering in the common cause of our liberty. So this is it, resolved, that until the Parliament's acts are repealed, we call for a boycott. These are economic sanctions of their time. Economic sanctions. We are going to stop buying and stop selling, which is going to harm our own livelihood, but we're going to call for economic sanctions against Parliament. Or against England. That's the Prince William County folks that did that. And some of those guys that I had up there were right there at that meeting. Henry Lee wasn't. Henry Lee, the second was down in Williamsburg because they were debating this too. The House of Burgesses was in session. But Prince William County basically led even the state, or I should say the colonial government. All right, now, I just wanted to do a little pitch here because myself and several of my friends, about 10 of them all, are going to come here on June 8th, and we're going to reenact this. And I think it's going to be at the, up in the garden by Ween Spots. What is the name of that pavilion? Is it Merchant Park? And no, it's Grayson. The building is Grayson, but it is Merchant Park. It's Merchant Park. My understanding is it's going to be there, but I could be wrong. And then we go over to Williamsburg. But it's going to be at Dumfries, June 8th. So you don't want to miss it because we are going to have a couple of planted Tories who are going to say, like, "Hey, calm down, calm down. We're not sure this is a good idea." Because we want to explore that side too before you know how it's going to end. I got to tell you a quick little sidebar. Quick, we did this a few years ago in York County, I should say. And my reenactment, I'm a member of the 7th Virginia. I command it, and so we had some people that were going to read some parts and all that, and we invited another unit that we knew, but we forgot that unit liked to do British more than American interpretation. And they stole the show away, and pretty soon York County was not passing its resolves in support. And I'm like, what do we do? I'm giving them with a stink eye here. You can't do that. They're changing history. Okay, next big thing, I think same year. I hope we do it. Ripple and Lodge again. All right. I think we are November. I heard. I've been working with Mark Plord about this. I hope. This is big, guys. So we're in 1774, and economic sanctions are basically what most people agree they're willing to do. And then we're going to send a delegation, 7 very important people: Washington, Peyton Randolph, Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, Benjamin Harrison, and 2 others who I can't think of right now. They're going up to Philadelphia to represent us at the Congress. Meanwhile, George Mason has a meeting in Fairfax County, and they form an independent militia company on their own, an extra legal company. Prince William County does the same thing. Now, I don't know exactly, I've got November down because that's when this letter was written, but it could have been earlier that they formed it. This letter, if you've been reading ahead of me, basically says that the people that got together to form this independent militia company basically want Colonel Washington to command it. Fairfax asked him, Prince William asked him, and I think 4 other counties asked him too. But I want you just to think about, oh, by the way, look at this. Either liberty or death was our motto, okay? Sound familiar? Mr. Henry, plagiarist. All right, liberty or death. Not kidding, I love Mr. Henry, I would never say that about him. And he himself would admit that he borrowed that from a play or something, and of course it goes all the way back to the Romans. All right, so the point though is this. This is another step, a hard step to confrontation. Economic sanctions is one thing. Preparing to fight against people who are your own people, and please remember, everyone's English here. We all think of ourselves as English. And so now it's like you guys deciding, okay, I'm fed up. We're going to form a militia company, and we're going to go and get ready in case we have to fight the Marines at Quantico. Yikes. All right? And I know that actually there are people in our country today that probably are doing that. I'm really uncomfortable with that. Washington, by the way, accepts the invitation, I guess. And he actually, when he was up in Philadelphia, he made contacts. And now in December, he writes a letter. And this letter says, I'm looking for 40 muskets with bayonets for the company in Prince William. They want a drum, they want colors, they want a flag, and things like that. Okay, now we jump ahead to March. Remember, everything goes a little slower here. So now we're in March 1775, and you all know Patrick Henry, 2nd Virginia Convention. Give me liberty or give me death. But what was he actually saying? You know what he was saying? He's basically saying, let's prepare to fight if we have to. Let's put ourselves in a better posture of defense. Well, guess what, guys? Prince William County's already done it, and so has Fairfax County. So he's asking the other 64 counties, or maybe 60, because a handful of others have also created independent companies. He's asking all the other ones to do that, do the same thing. Just give me one company per county. And they debated, and it was a very close vote in Richmond on that March 23rd, and his persuasiveness convinced them, something like 65 to 60, to vote yes. There were people that were against his resolve, said, no, you're sending the wrong message. When this gets back to Parliament, they're going to think we're getting ready for war, which means they're going to think we want war, and we don't want war. But Henry's like, I don't know what you guys are looking at, but from my point of view, the war is already here. It's here. Look what's going on in Boston. And of course, 3 weeks later, bam, Now, this is a good image of what our early soldiers would have looked like. Right here, hunting shirts, liberty or death. That was a phrase that swept Virginia during that time period. I've been doing this 25 years as a reenactor, and we're still arguing with each other about the color of hunting shirts. Was it dark? Was it black? Was it blue? Was it green? But anyway, they wore hunting shirts early on. Linen, rough linen. Okay, now, what happens next is 2 days after Lexington and Concord. How many people in Virginia knew about Lexington and Concord 2 days after it happened? Nobody. Nobody. It took 10 days for the news to reach. But 2 days afterwards, these guys from a little British ship in the York River steal 15 barrels of gunpowder from the powder magazine in Williamsburg, and they get caught on their way out. That creates a ruckus, an uproar. Governor Dunmore kind of calms everything down a little bit by lying. He literally admits, I told them that slaves were going to steal it. You know, in a letter back to England, he kind of admits that he made that up. This guy is Patrick Henry, and he is upset, and he's going to lead a march on Williamsburg. But you know what? Prince William troops almost went there too, because our company and the Fairfax company and the company that was formed in Spotsylvania County in Fredericksburg, commanded by Hugh Mercer. You guys ever heard of him? General Hugh Mercer. George Wheaton, later on, General George Wheaton. They're in the same company. They all meet in Fredericksburg, and then they get a letter from Williamsburg, from Peyton Randolph, saying, please don't come here. We finally calmed the governor down. He's threatening to burn the city and arm the slaves. And so we cancel our march to Williamsburg. He doesn't. He gets within a day's march of it, somewhere. Stops at an ordinary of all places, Doncastle's ordinary, and then a negotiation happens and everything's calmed down. But again, Prince William troops are ready to go, ready to fight. Oh, and that's what I just kind of bled into this. That they end up here in Fredericksburg. There's a big meeting on April 29th. The same day they're meeting about going to Williamsburg, the news starts to come in about Boston. Okay? And it doesn't take a genius to go, they stole gunpowder from us in Williamsburg, and now you're telling me that there's bloodshed in Massachusetts? And a lot of people on both sides died? What's the British Army doing in the countryside? Looking for gunpowder and arms? Well, what? No, conspiracy? Anybody? Conspiracy? Yep. All right. Everything's tense. We're at war. By the summer, we're at war in New England, not so much in the South, but the governor flees in June. What's going on in the fall? The 3rd Virginia Convention meets, and they say, look, the independent militia companies aren't going to do it. We need to be better organized. They create 2 regiments of regulars, and some troops from Prince William. They will form a company from Prince William, Fairfax, and Loudoun County, and they will form and join the 2nd Virginia Regiment. And then we create a Minute Battalion. A lot of people don't know this. There were Minutemen in Virginia, and so we have our own little Minute Battalion. And you see these 3 gentlemen right here are commanding companies from Prince William in the Prince William Minute Battalion. I love that it's Prince William Minute Battalion because it was also Fairfax and I want to say Loudoun, but we got the name for some reason. I don't know why it wasn't the Fairfax Minute Battalion. All right, now we jump down to the fighting that takes place. This gives you an idea. So we raise troops here. Of course, by now, Governor Dunmore, who has fled Williamsburg, has gone down and around, and he's kind of hanging out in the fall of 75 in Norfolk on a ship, and he doesn't have a whole lot of support, so there's not much he can do, but he does send some British soldiers that he got from St. Augustine out, and they're collecting weapons down here in Princess Anne County, Virginia Beach, and all that. Then there's fighting. The first shooting happens in Hampton. We'll be recreating that next year, reenacting that in late October. The British are actually going to try to burn down Hampton in late October of 1775, and they're stopped. Then there's fighting at Kempsville. Anybody know what big important thing came out of the Kemp's Landing fight? Dunmore's proclamation. Are you familiar with Dunmore's proclamation? He basically, after he won that little battle and he routed the militia there, he made an announcement and he published it. He said, it's time for all loyal Virginians to come to the king's colors, the standard, answer the call, else you are disloyal. And, this is the important part, he offered freedom to any runaway enslaved person of a rebel who fought for him. That doesn't apply to women. It doesn't apply to any loyalist slave, because theoretically I was imagine that the loyal slaves might be already be forced to fight. But that's what he's doing, and he writes, well, by late November, he writes, hundreds are coming in. Hundreds of runaway slaves are coming in for a chance at freedom, which is not what he's concerned about. He just needs troops. Well, that force that he raises in Norfolk gets stronger and stronger, and then there's a big standoff down at Great Bridge. This is the big battle in Virginia for 1775. Our Prince William County troops there, only in the 2nd Virginia Regiment, and that would be the regulars that signed up for a year. The 1st and 2nd regiments served for 1 full year. And so this was a big standoff. The guy who commanded the troops there was a guy named Colonel William Woodford, and he described it as a miniature Bunker Hill, only we held. We held our position. And it decimated Dunmore. It really kind of clipped his wings and made him a lot less likely to be forced in Virginia. All right, here are three of my friends from the past, because after 1775, we get to 1776, what's happening? Thomas Paine's writing Common Sense. More news from England, how they banned all gunpowder and more troops are coming. And of course, we're having, there's fighting everywhere. These guys represent the 3rd Virginia Regiment. Why do I want to highlight them? Because the 3rd Virginia was raised from Prince William, Fairfax, Loudoun, Stafford, King George, and several others. They had 10 companies all together. And they were posted, and by the way, I have to apologize. I noticed this only when I put this on my PowerPoint. Poor Stafford has been replaced by King George over here. My photographer, I didn't notice it, so it's my fault. That needs to be over here, and you all know Stafford's over there, so I apologize for everybody at Stafford. But the 3rd Virginia Regiment, their assignment is to guard the Potomac River. So they're in Dumfries, and they're all the way up to Alexandria, and they're posted, they have companies here. And we have letters, and you know who commands the 3rd? Hugh Mercer. That's a character right there. He's a great guy. So Mercer's commanding the 3rd Virginia, and he's going back and forth with the new commander in the South, a guy named Charles Lee. Not any of our Lees. He's a different Lee altogether. But he's taken over in Virginia for a little while before he goes on to South Carolina. And basically, Lee does not like this arrangement where the 3rd Virginia guards this part of the Potomac, and the 5th Virginia guards all this. And somebody else, the 7th Virginia's down here. We have 9 regiments now. We've gone from 2 to 9. So we're guarding the Potomac. Okay, now, this is the time to mention Light Horse Harry Lee. He's the greatest warrior of the Revolution that comes out of Prince William County. 20 years old when he answers the call, actually thrown down by General Charles Lee, who, this guy almost became an aide-de-camp to Lee. He wanted to be his aide, but for whatever reason, I think the letter never reached Lee or something, and as a result, Lee volunteered to be a dragoon, a cavalry officer, and he was made captain of the 5th Troop. So there were 6 troops, also companies, 35 men to each troop, and he was in command of one of them. And boy, oh boy, if you want an exciting read about an exciting character, at least in the Revolution, I mean, his life kind of goes downhill afterwards. He's the sort of guy that has the best parts of his life happen before he hit 30. But the stuff he did in the South is absolutely phenomenal. And then I've got a handful of books. I wrote a little military biography of him, and we use that image from my friend Pam White, the artist. All right, Andrew Leach, I mentioned. Did I mention him? Yeah, I mentioned him. I used to take my children to the water park there. Andrew Leach is in the 3rd Virginia. It's a little confusing because he ends up being a major, and I haven't figured out how that rank thing happened. But he and another very important New Englander named Thomas Knowlton get wounded, mortally wounded, in this little battle called Harlem Heights. A great little battle, actually. Remember, in 1776, the first big battle of the year happened about 3 weeks earlier on Long Island in Brooklyn, and it was a rout. We got routed. Then the British land on Kips Bay and take Manhattan, and then the American army runs up over here to Harlem Heights. And then the British are kind of messing with them, and Washington sends out a force. And what happened was Leach was leading the rifleman. He was going to flank him, and he was going to actually get around the British and kind of trap him in a vice, but he didn't quite make it. And he got 2 musket balls in the side, and he died a few days later of that, up there. Okay, Colonel William Grayson again. He's going to command a regiment that most of us aren't used to, and it's not really a Virginia regiment because Congress gave Washington permission to raise several regiments kind of detached from the states. Now we're states by 1776. So Grayson is a Virginian, and he commands this regiment, but there are Virginians, people from Maryland and Delaware, I believe, too, that are in it. So he's recruiting from the middle Atlantic. All right, let's talk more details about Prince William now. You all know about Trenton, right? The Battle of Trenton, crossing the Delaware and all that. What are we going to do with those 900 prisoners? 900 Hessians get captured. Guess what? They come to Williamsburg. They come to Dumfries. They come to Virginia. They're housed in Virginia. I couldn't believe it when I read this. And I found this Hessian diary, and this guy describes the town. This is what he thought of Williamsburg. Sorry, I'm from Williamsburg now, I keep saying it. Now what he thought of Dumfries. It's a little place, 50 or 60 houses, very unhealthy because of the marsh and all that, but strong tobacco business and all. And there are more quotes. I just wanted to give you that little clip about him. He was basically given his parole. You know, the way we treated prisoners back then was, especially if he was an officer, and I think he was do you promise to behave? Yes, okay, good, behave. And he promised, and if he breaks his parole, then he can be in prison. But basically, he's off to fend for himself and, you know, make money if he needs to and all that. By the summer of 77, we decide that it's too risky to keep these prisoners in Dumfries. So they are moved out to Winchester, where they're out there, and I guess some of them are going to help Colonel Morgan build a house that's one of those days. All right, here's another thing. Oh, sorry, I should have warned you. Smallpox. By 1777, General Washington is fed up with the impact smallpox is having on his army. And so he wants all the troops that are coming in another wave. See, in 77, we add 6 more regiments. We have to recruit replace a lot of men that are missing from the original 9. And so he says, I don't want anybody coming to my camp in New Jersey until they are inoculated. And so this is what smallpox looks like in the 1930s for this poor guy here. That Abigail Adams scene there, not Abigail, in the John Adams miniseries, they do a good job of it too. But Dumfries was a place where people were inoculated. Alexandria was, and all the way up to Pennsylvania. Okay, and now we're in the kind of middle section that goes really, really fast because not a lot happened from 77 to 80. How are you guys doing? Anybody have any questions? Or oh God, no, I should have 45 minutes, right? Okay. I thought I started at 2, but I started at 2:15. I'm sorry. Prince William militia reinforces General Washington, okay? And this is in the fall of 77. What happened is Patrick Henry writes a letter saying, I need help. Washington needs help. And so, do you have any men that can go up there? And so I think 1/3 of the militia from Prince William, Fairfax, Loudoun, and the northern counties were kind of raised to go up there. The person I'm most interested in all this is Colonel Blackburn. Because I found it fascinating when I found out that he got shot at the Battle of Germantown. And I think that bullet stayed in him until he died, is the way I remember it. So he was up there and with the militia. He might have been volunteering. There might have been a dispute about rank or something. But he's up there. So there are Prince William troops with Washington as militia just for 3 months. Now, here in Prince William, there are constant alarms of the British Navy. Remember, the Navy or their privateers that are working for them seem to be constantly sailing up in the Chesapeake Bay and up the Potomac. And so we have accounts of the militia being called out for service. And they keep going to the same place, which is basically Quantico. You can go to this very spot where they probably built the redoubt that they talk about, a little fort, a little encampment. To defend. I guess, I don't know what is so special about this place. Right now, there's a helicopter hangar there for the president's helicopters and all, but this is where they always seem to go when there was alarms that the British were in the river or coming up. Prince William militia also went south in 1780. Some troops marched all the way down, and they were down in this area of South Carolina for a few months over the winter of 80-81. Can't find anything that they were involved with anything, though, aside from marching the Cowpens prisoners back north. They probably did that. but they didn't really get into cow pens or any of the big fighting. All right, so I want to talk about, now we're in 81, the last year I'm going to talk about, guys. So everybody take a deep breath. In 81, the war comes back to Virginia. Benedict Arnold invades in January. General Phillips shows up in March with reinforcements. Cornwallis shows up, General Cornwallis shows up in May with more British troops and more troops from the north. Now you got 7,000 troops here. In April, when Phillips showed up, he sent a little squadron up the Potomac River, okay? Up the Chesapeake Bay and up the Potomac River. I'd have to go back and I'm comfortable showing you this because this is an eyewitness account from somebody from King George that said he has 2 warships, 24-gun ships, 2 18 guns, and transports, okay? They are going and raiding both sides of the Potomac, mostly Maryland though, and one of those tenders, a little small ship that kind of assists the bigger ships, sailed all the way up to Alexandria and tried to steal a tobacco ship. But this is the story I really want to talk about. Where are you? Anyway, thank you. It's a great little story, but it's not Prince William. I apologize for that. But I saw this view the other day of Mount Vernon from the river, and I was like, oh, this is what they would have seen. So as part of this little raid, a British warship or privateer stopped right here and basically threatened to burn down Mount Vernon. Some of Washington's slaves fled to the ship and were taken on board the ship. And then this is what happened. I want you to read this letter. This is a letter, because the person you need to know, the person in charge of this estate while Washington was away was his cousin, Lund. Lund, Washington, okay? Martha wasn't even here then. Every winter she would go up, or fall really, she would go up at the end of the campaign season and stay with her husband. And so she's not back yet. It's just Lund here. And so what he does is he negotiates with the British commander. First, he's trying to get those slaves back. Second, he's trying to protect the whole house. He's offering them refreshments and all that. It's General Lafayette who actually tells Washington that this happened and says, and people are talking, sir. They're not very pleased because across the river, somebody lost their house because they didn't negotiate. And across the air, somebody else lost their house. And so there are some that are raising eyebrows about this. And this is Washington's letter to his cousin Lund, who's taking care. I am very sorry to hear of your loss, meaning he lost his own personal property, or even some of his own slaves. I am a little sorry to hear of my own, but what gives me most concern is that you should go aboard the enemy's vessels and furnish them with refreshments. It would have been a less painful circumstance to me to have heard that in consequence of your non-compliance with their request, they had burnt my house and laid the plantation in ruins. You ought to have considered yourself as my representative and should have reflected on the bad example of communicating with the enemy and making a voluntary offer of refreshments to them with a view to prevent a conflagration. But to go on board their vessels, carry them refreshments, commune with a parcel of plundering scoundrels, and request a favor by asking the surrender of my Negroes was exceedingly ill-judged, and 'tis to be feared will be unhappy in its consequences, as it will be a precedent for others. Those are his words, General Washington's words in a letter, okay, to his cousin, reprimanding his cousin for this. He's very upset by that. Now, those same people that were involved in this were also, some of those same people were captured. One small schooner that had made it all the way to Alexandria and tried to steal a vessel there were discovered, and then they raced down the river, and 2 boats were chasing them, and they ended up in Prince William County. They ended up coming ashore because they thought they were going to get overtaken before they could reach Cedar Point. Now, Cedar Point is over by Dahlgreen, right, over there on King George. And so what happened is these guys went ashore, and this was a convoluted thing, but Henry Lee, oh, I messed that up. That should be Henry Lee II writing to Governor Jefferson, explained that they captured him, and now these guys are in Prince William County. But this is the one I really, it's right here. Oh, right here. If the enemy had succeeded in Alexandria to steal the ship, they intended, one of the prisoners say, to have burnt General Washington's houses, plundered Colonel Mason at Gunston Hall, and myself, and endeavored to have made me a prisoner. So Henry Lee II, that's a typo, was on their list of people they wanted to capture. Again, just to note, they've heard of them at least. All right. Thankfully, I'm glad for Lund. We still have Mount Vernon, we still have Gunston Hall, and Louisiana that never hurt until later. All right, last thing to talk about. The last thing. That is Yorktown. So, you know, I assume you know the story somewhat. Cornwallis goes to Yorktown to establish a Navy base there under instructions from his commander in New York, General Clinton. So he's there, he thinks he's safe. The French Navy comes up, chases the British Navy away. Bam, you lose the naval access to the ocean. Rochambeau and Washington are planning a march. They take some of their army. They sail down the Chesapeake with most of their troops, but they send their baggage wagons and horses by land, and they come themselves. And so Washington, you know, everybody now wants to get involved, and Prince William County's ready. They got men ready to fight. Washington says, nope, I need you to do something else. And this is, again, from Henry Lee, the second guy in charge of the county. He says, I drafted, meaning I had to force people, 285 privates. This is interesting because he says half my militia. So obviously Prince William probably could field 600 men. I drafted 285. What was their job? To repair the roads, to fix the roads for the large baggage train coming down, all right? And I don't know if you've ever been there. I've gone and explored, but the big thing was Wolf Run Ford, okay? And it's flooded now because of the reservoir and all that. But basically, it never occurred to me. You guys are familiar with the main crossing point over the Occoquan, right? Of that time, Colchester. It was Colchester. You took a ferry. But you're not going to use a ferry to cross, you know, 200 wagons and 200 horses and all that. That's going to take forever. They need a ford. They need to find a place where it's low that they can get across. And apparently Wolf Run Ford was it, but the road leading down to it, leading back, was difficult. And so these guys were put to work in September doing logistics is what it was. And this was interesting because this, at the end of his letter, he says, and after all their hard work, we will now have opened a direct way from Georgetown to Dumfries. All right, so we go back to the original map. It's somewhere up here, really, is what we're talking about. And the road came all the way down to Dumfries. And then there's one more thing I want to point out. And the King's Highway, something I discovered many years ago in Prince William Forest. This, I think, is an image of that. I could have taken this picture, but I grabbed it from the internet. But I have pictures on my camera somewhere of the the old Telegraph Road is the way it's described, but it's actually the original King's Highway. Rob, we were talking about portions of it, right? Over by Ripon Lodge. In fact, my students years ago helped reclaim some of that. The Quantico Marine Corps base. So they worked on all that. That was their job to get Washington and Rochambeau down to Yorktown. All right, big finish. So Prince William County and the Revolution. What other takeaways, so to speak? What is there we should remember? We should first remember some of the people from Prince William County that played a big role. Henry Lee did not play a big role in the battlefield, Henry Lee II, but his son, Light Horse Harry Lee, Harry III, he did. Of course, it irks me a little bit that he's more remembered, especially probably in Manassas, for being the father of Robert E. Lee, but he was a heck of a cavalryman during the war, too. And by the way, his memoirs are amazing to read. So if you ever get a chance, you should read his account of the Southern Campaign. And then these gentlemen that I mentioned earlier, Francis Richard Lee was a captain in the 3rd Virginia. I mentioned Thomas Blackburn and all. Also, I'm super proud of being from Prince William County and the fact that they were the first county to pass the resolves in support of Boston. They were the first one in Virginia who stood up and said, "We're with you, Boston. We're with you." Okay, and then of course, hundreds of soldiers from Prince William County served in the Continental Army. I mentioned the 3rd a lot. There's also in Morgan's, Colonel Morgan's 11th Virginia, and I don't know about the others. I mentioned Grayson's as well. And then of course, many more even served in the militia throughout the war. Okay, so that's my take on Prince William County and the Revolution. No battles to speak of. Just a lot of alarms and a little bit of road work and a lot of people outside of our boundaries doing heroic things.